Billionaire gets a call from hospital. Sir, your number is saved on a waitress's phone as Dad. What if a single phone call could change everything you thought you knew about your life? David Harrison was reviewing quarterly reports in his Manhattan office when his assistant knocked hesitantly. Sir, there's a call from St. Mary's Hospital. They say it's urgent. He'd donated millions to hospitals over the years, so emergency calls weren't unusual. But when the nurse's voice trembled through the speaker, his world shifted. Mr. Harrison, we found your number in a patient's phone. She's been in an accident, and well, sir, your contact is saved as Dad. David's pen fell from his fingers. He'd never had children, never been married. The 42-year-old had built an empire, but lived alone in his penthouse, convinced that family was a luxury he couldn't afford. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake, he whispered. But something deep in his chest told him to listen. The nurse continued, her name is Lucy Chen. She's 24, and she's asking for you. Where are you watching from tonight? David's hands shook as he grabbed his coat. Lucy Chen. The name echoed in his mind during the 40-minute drive to Queens. His driver, Frank, had worked for him for 8 years and knew better than to ask questions, but David could feel his curious glances in the rear-view mirror. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and worry. Familiar yet foreign to a man who'd spent his life in boardrooms and charity galas. Room 312, the nurse said gently, studying David's expensive suit against the backdrop of this modest neighborhood hospital. She's stable, but she was asking for her dad before the surgery. We thought you should know. David had built Harrison Industries from nothing after his parents died when he was 20. He'd learned to trust numbers, not people. Emotions were complications he couldn't afford. But standing outside Lucy's door, something inside him cracked. She was sleeping. Her black hair spread across the white pillow like spilled ink. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped steadily, reassuringly. She looked impossibly young and fragile. David found himself stepping closer, studying her face for any resemblance to himself or anyone he might have known. There was nothing familiar. Yet something about her peaceful expression stirred a protective instinct he'd never felt before. Excuse me, are you family? A doctor appeared beside him, clipboard in hand. Dr. Martinez looked tired but kind, the sort of physician who still believed in healing beyond medicine. I'm not sure, David admitted, the honesty surprising him. She has my number saved as Dad, but I don't understand why. Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. She mentioned you several times before the anesthesia. Said you taught her about kindness. Does that ring any bells? Kindness. David tried to remember the last time he'd been genuinely kind to a stranger, not just writing checks for tax deductions. His life was measured in profit margins and market shares, not human connections. What happened to her? He asked quietly. Car accident on her way home from work. She's a waitress at Murphy's Diner on 8th Avenue. Single impact, but she'll be fine. The question is, will you be here when she wakes up? David looked at this sleeping girl who somehow considered him family and felt something shift in his chest. His phone buzzed with messages about missed meetings and urgent decisions. But for the first time in 20 years, none of that seemed to matter. Doctor, how long before she wakes up? A few hours, maybe less. She's strong. David pulled out his phone and did something he'd never done before. He canceled everything for the rest of the week. As evening fell outside the hospital windows, David settled into the uncomfortable visitor's chair beside Lucy's bed. He didn't know why she'd saved his number that way. Didn't know what kindness she thought he'd shown her. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't leaving until he found out. Whatever connection existed between them, whatever moment had made her think of him as family, he owed it to both of them to discover the truth. Lucy's eyes fluttered open just after midnight, unfocused and searching. When they found David's face, she smiled so genuinely that it took his breath away. Dad, she whispered, her voice hollow from the breathing tube. You came? David's throat closed up. This wasn't a mistake or confusion for medication. She knew exactly who he was. Lucy, he said softly, leaning forward. I need you to help me understand something. Why do you have my number saved that way? Her smile faltered slightly, replaced by something that looked like embarrassment. You don't remember me, do you? The disappointment in her voice cut through him like a blade. I want to, he said honestly. Please help me remember. She closed her eyes, gathering strength. 5 years ago, Murphy's Diner. You came in during the worst snowstorm of the winter. I was new, barely 19, and I just aged out of foster care. I was living in my car because I couldn't afford first month's rent anywhere. David's memory stirred. He remembered that storm, remembered stopping at a diner because his usual restaurant was closed. But the details were fuzzy, buried under years of similar forgotten moments. You ordered coffee and apple pie, Lucy continued, her voice growing stronger. I was so nervous I spilled coffee on your expensive coat. I started crying because I thought I'd lose my job. And you stopped me from apologizing. You said mistakes happen to good people and good people deserve second chances. The memory was coming back now. Vague, but real. A young waitress with trembling hands and frightened eyes. You asked if I was okay. Really okay, not just about the coffee. No one had asked me that in years. When I said I was fine, you didn't believe me. You said sometimes the bravest thing is admitting when we need help. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. So I told you about living in my car, about being scared and alone. You listened like it mattered. David felt the memory solidifying, becoming real. You gave me $2,000. Lucy whispered. Cash. Said it was for first month's rent and security deposit, but it was really a loan until I got steady on my feet. You wrote your number on the receipt and said if I ever needed anything at all, I should call. The weight of that moment settled on David's shoulders. He'd completely forgotten, filed it away as just another charitable gesture. I tried to pay you back so many times over the years, Lucy continued. I'd call your office, but they said you were too busy. So I kept your number, and I started thinking of you as the dad I never had, the first person who ever saw me as worth saving. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. David felt something breaking open inside his chest. Lucy, but before he could finish, Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway with a concerned expression. Mr. Harrison, I need to speak with you privately. It's about Lucy's insurance and the bills. There's been a complication. David's blood ran cold. Whatever this complication was, he could see in the doctor's face that it was serious enough to threaten everything Lucy had worked so hard to build. In the hallway, Dr. Martinez delivered the devastating news. Lucy's insurance was canceled 3 weeks ago due to a clerical error at her job. The hospital bills alone will exceed $60,000, and that's before we factor in the rehabilitation she'll need for her leg injury. Without insurance, she'll be financially ruined. David felt his heart sink. He knew what $60,000 meant to someone like Lucy. It was years of wages, a lifetime of debt. There's more, Dr. Martinez continued reluctantly. The driver who hit her was uninsured and fled the scene. There's no one else to cover these costs. The billing department wants to know how she plans to pay before we can continue treatment. David's hands clenched into fists. The injustice burned in his chest. Here was someone who'd worked tirelessly to build a life from nothing, and one accident threatened to destroy it all. When he returned to Lucy's room, she was staring at the ceiling with tears streaming down her cheeks. I heard, she said quietly. Dr. Martinez thought I was sleeping, but I heard him talking to the nurse about transferring me to the county hospital. Her voice broke. Dad, I'm so scared. I finally have a little apartment, a job I love, and now she couldn't finish the sentence. David sat down heavily in the chair beside her bed. For the first time in his adult life, he understood what real fear looked like. Not the fear of losing money or market position, but the fear of losing everything that made life worth living. Lucy, I need to tell you something, he said, his voice thick with emotion. 5 years ago, when I helped you, I'd forgotten about it within a week. I was so focused on my business, on making money, that I forgot the most important thing I'd ever done. He took her hand, surprised by how small and cold it felt. You called me Dad, and I didn't understand why, but sitting here tonight, watching you fight, seeing your courage, I understand now. You weren't just some waitress I helped. You were someone who needed a father. And for one moment, I was brave enough to be that person. Lucy squeezed his hand weakly. The truth is, Lucy, I've been alone my whole adult life. I thought success meant not needing anyone, not letting anyone need me, but you kept my number all these years. You thought of me as family, and I threw that away without even realizing what I had. His voice cracked. I don't deserve to be called dad by someone as strong and beautiful as you. Lucy turned to face him fully, her eyes bright with tears and something else. Hope. It's not about deserving, she whispered. It's about choosing. Every day we choose whether to care about each other or not. You chose to care about me when no one else would. That made you my dad in every way that matters. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. David felt something profound shifting inside him. For 42 years, he defined himself by what he owned, what he'd achieved. But in this sterile hospital room, holding the hand of a young woman who saw him as family, he finally understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. The question was it too late to become the father she'd always believed him to be? David stood up abruptly, his decision crystallizing with startling clarity. Lucy, I need to make some phone calls. I'll be right back. But instead of leaving, he pulled out his phone and dialed his lawyer's number right there in the room. Bill, it's David. I need you to draw up adoption papers immediately. Yes, I know what time it is. This is an emergency. Lucy's eyes widened in shock. Dad, what are you doing? Something I should have done 5 years ago, David said firmly, then spoke into the phone again. I also need you to contact St. Mary's Hospital Billing Department. All expenses for Lucy Chun in room 312 are to be transferred to my personal account. Everything, Bill. Every single bill. He ended the call and looked at Lucy, whose tears were flowing freely now. David, you can't just... she started. But he held up his hand gently. Lucy, for 5 years, you carried my phone number, believing I was your father. The only mistake was that I didn't know it. He sat back down, taking both her hands and his. I've spent my whole life building a company, accumulating wealth, but I never built a family. I convinced myself I didn't need one, that love was a distraction from success. Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, having overheard a part of the conversation. Mr. Harrison, the billing issue has been resolved, but adoption, that's a significant legal process. Are you certain? David looked at Lucy, seeing not just a young woman in a hospital bed, but the daughter he'd never known he wanted. Doctor, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Lucy was crying openly now, but they were tears of joy mixed with disbelief. I can't let you do this just because you feel guilty, she said through her tears. This has to be real or it doesn't mean anything. David felt his own eyes filling up. Lucy, guilt isn't what's driving this. Love is that I love who you are, who you've become, despite everything life threw at you. I love that you kept faith in a connection I was too blind to see. Most of all, I love that you called me Dad when I'd forgotten how to be human. He squeezed her hands tighter. 5 years ago, you said the bravest thing is admitting when we need help. Well, I need help learning how to be a father, and you need help becoming the amazing woman you're meant to be. Maybe we can figure it out together. Lucy nodded through her tears, unable to speak. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. David's lawyers arrived with papers. His assistant coordinated with the hospital, and Frank drove Lucy's belongings from her small apartment to David's penthouse guest room. But the most important moment came when Dr. Martinez presented Lucy with her discharge papers completely paid in full. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. As David wheeled Lucy toward the hospital exit, she looked up at him with wonder. Dad, are you sure about all this? Your life is going to change completely. David smiled, feeling lighter than he had in decades. Lucy, my life already changed the moment you decided I was worth calling family. Everything else is just paperwork. 6 months later, David stood in the kitchen of his penthouse attempting to flip pancakes while Lucy laughed from her seat at the breakfast bar. Her leg had healed completely, but she still worked at Murphy's Diner because, as she put it, some things are too important to give up just because you don't need them anymore. The adoption had been finalized 3 weeks earlier, and David Harrison was officially Lucy Chen Harrison's father. "Dad, you're supposed to wait until the bubbles pop before you flip them," Lucy said, pointing at his latest culinary disaster. "I run a billion-dollar company, but I can't make pancakes," David muttered, scraping burnt batter off the pan. "Maybe we should stick to cereal." Lucy slid off her stool and gently took the spatula from his hands. "Here, let me show you again." As they cooked together, David marveled at how naturally they'd fallen into this rhythm of family life. Lucy had transformed a sterile penthouse into a home with her secondhand books, her plants that somehow thrived despite his black thumb, and her habit of leaving encouraging notes in his briefcase. In return, he'd given her something she'd never had: unconditional security and love. "I have something for you," David said, pulling a small wrapped box from his pocket. Lucy's eyes lit up as she opened it to reveal a simple silver locket. Inside was a photo from the diner 5 years ago. David had tracked down the security footage and had the moment printed. "This is from the day we first met," he said softly. "I want you to have it so you remember that sometimes the most important moments happen when we're not paying attention." Lucy fastened the locket around her neck, her eyes bright with tears. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about going back to school. Maybe studying social work. I want to help kids who aged out of foster care like I did." David felt his chest swell with pride. "Lucy, that's perfect. Whatever you need, tuition, living expenses, anything, it's yours." She shook her head with a smile. "I want to pay my own way. You taught me that the most valuable things are the ones we earn ourselves, but maybe you could help me figure out how to start a scholarship fund for other kids." David pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by how much she'd grown, how much they'd both grown. That evening, as they sat on the terrace, watching the sunset over Manhattan, Lucy leaned against David's shoulder. "Dad, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been in that accident?" David considered the question carefully. "I think we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are too strong to stay hidden forever." Lucy smiled. "I used to think I was unlucky. Bouncing between foster homes, living in my car, getting hit by that driver. But now I think maybe I was the luckiest person alive, because all of it led me to you." David kissed the top of her head, his heart full in a way he never imagined possible. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose, and the most precious gifts come disguised as ordinary moments. Thank you for sharing this journey with us.